So is it a bit like with ceramics when you're sort of slip casting and you're pouring into a mould, or are you because you said pressing?
Press moulding and slip casting.
Welcome back to Artfully Crafted. My name is Eleanor, and each week I travel to a craftsperson's studio, interview them and show you their work. This week we're headed to the grounds of Wilton House to visit a workshop and business called Coade. Started by Stephen, it is named after a stoneware that was invented in the late 18th century by Eleanor Coade, hence the name. And Stephen brought back this method, which was really popular back in the late 18th century and early 19th century because it mimics the look of stone but is weatherproof. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, hello.
Well, thank you so much for having me. We're here at Coade, a business that you set up a few years ago.
Many years ago.
And we're in the grounds of Wilton House, which is, quite splendid, really.
Yeah.
So maybe we can kick things off with you telling the audience about, Coade as a business. Maybe what you do and the size of a business and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're essentially a sculpture studio comprising of 6 full-time artists and artisans, designing, sculpting and creating anything you can think of when looking at a historic house, exterior or interior. Working in, quite often working with designers and architects. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all over the world, working in America and all over Europe, as well as, even further afield. And probably I started with a sort of practice, within the practice of restoration and conservation of sculpture, mm-hmm. and it's in that.
Because you still do conservation,
Yeah,
right?
we do. We do a lot of conservation and restoration. It's, and I think that it was the restoration and conservation that drew, allowed me to discover Coade Stone, which mm-hmm. was a type of material developed at the end of the 18th century in about sort of 1770 by a woman called Eleanor Coade, and she, like many industrialists, then were trying to work out ways of shortcutting. Finding shortcuts for creating things, whether they might have been, people were trying to sort of work out how to make gold with chemistry, and people were trying to work out how to make a plastic stone. And what Eleanor did was take a Devon ball clay mm-hmm. and add ingredients to it and fire it so as to create something like stone.
And that would be more weatherproof.
That would be more weatherproof, that could be molded and cast, so it could be replicated more quickly than its mm-hmm. equivalent carving in stone.
And more accurately as well.
Yeah, and more accurately, as well as just free modelled as sort of figurative sculpture.
That Georgian sort of obsession with perfection.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I guess her practice blossomed in the 18th century because there was the explosion of great houses that were built mm-hmm. In that tide of sort of industrialization. And so discovering her pieces in the 90s got me interested in how it was made and how we might be able to make it and how we might be able to restore it.
Because I mean, that sort of knowledge base of the Coade Stone that had sort of had it been lost or kind of fallen out of?
It had diminished from, when you imagine what was how much terracotta, I mean, Coade Stone is essentially a terracotta, how much terracotta was produced through the 19th century up to say, the Victoria and Albert Museum. I mean, the whole facade is terracotta. But after that, we see it really dropping off until today, when we've got some brickworks. We've got a sort of we've got a few terracotta manufactories, but we've gone from, you know, tens of thousands of people in the Georgian Victorian eras knowing how to produce terracotta to probably a few thousand today. So it was quite hard for us to re-establish and work with the practice, and we're still learning today, 30 years on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
a lot of trial and error, trying to sort of refine that. Because I think you said to me off camera that so it's not just the sort of like ingredients, it's also, you know, the firing temperature. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about what it is that makes it so?
There's this great myth with Coade Stone that the recipe was lost when Eleanor Coade passed and the company went folded. But that's sort of true. But I mean, really what was lost is everything, the ingredients, but also how some of the practice, the sculpting that they did, which was so amazing. The piece moulding, which is a type of mould that predates the silicon rubber moulds that we know now. How the sculptures constructed hollow, how they're dried, how they're moved, because they're quite fragile before they're fired, how they're fired, all the science behind the firing cycles, even how to unload a kiln, you know, it's sort of, so there was quite a lot to rediscover, and not that many people around who know how to fire big pieces of ceramics, because quite often we end up making really large pieces.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some small examples here, but
under this table there's a 6-foot decorative water trough sarcophagus, so it's,
So how did you do it? I mean, were there books that you turned to, or was it just pure experimentation?
A little bit of help from some of the universities, the ceramic departments, some ceramic students, a lot of reading, a lot of trial and error. But the restoration of some of the terracottas that we've done has been really useful, because obviously we quite often get pieces of terracotta, Coade, etc. into the workshop, and where it's been broken, we can see inside, and that gives us a real insight into the ingredients and the size of the ingredients, the size of the inclusions of the ingredients that go into the Coade mix.
Was it that precise a science when you look at all of this?
No, it's not. I think it was more. I think, you know, you can imagine in the factory that they would have been producing really large pieces of work, and then they would have. I think they were just adding certain ingredients to the clay for that month to give it certain qualities. I don't think it was that calculated.
Can we maybe talk about some of your current projects that you've got happening? I think I saw some vases in the workshop that a couple of people were working on.
We've got we're producing 8 vases for parapets, and you know, that's a classic example of where Coade works, because they're highly decorated, and because they're coming out of a mould, there's a certain amount of replication that the mould is giving us. So we're able to make them quite quickly, far more quickly than you could carve them in stone.
So what is the process? So for this particular project, are you actually, is it reproducing something that's already there? Or is it making completely new work?
No, it's a completely new building within the grounds of a historic house.
Perfect, okay. So you're designing something?
So we've referenced one of Eleanor Coade's designs.
Okay.
For a vase, which has been approved by the owner and various architects involved.
And so then, what are the different stages then of before you get to those sort of 8, you said, finished pieces?
To get the first one is pretty expensive and quite drawn out. So we have to create a facsimile of the vase. We have to sculpt a vase with all its decoration, 10% larger than the end size, because all ceramics shrink. About 10%, we'll say 10%. Yeah. So we have to create the vase 10% larger than it's going to be. We then take a plaster piece mould off that, which is a series of interlocking pieces of plaster that form the negative mould.
Yes.
Once you've got the mould, we can press the Coade mix into the mould. Mm-hmm. We can then take the mould off.
And you said it's made hollow, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how much, like, what's the thickness?
Well, that ranges from something like this and this, which could be about an inch thick or 20 to 30 millimeters thick, up to something like the thickness of a brick. Mm-hmm. Standard brick. What is that? I don't know, 4 or 5 inches.
Yeah.
So as the object gets bigger, the walls get bigger, thicker.
So is it a bit like with ceramics when you're sort of slip casting and you're pouring into a mold, or because you said pressing?
Press molding and slip casting. Yeah. So slip casting, yeah, they are very similar, and they use.
Like is it liquid when you're?
No, it's like it has the consistency of mud or of modelling clay as we would know it from school.
So would you actually take each piece of the mold, sort of build up the layers and then put it together?
Yeah, there's different. Some simple molds can just exist like that, and you can press the clay in and then leave the clay in the mold for say 24 hours, 48 hours for it to firm up a bit. And then you take the mold off, and the clay's firm enough that it can just stand there.
I see.
Other pieces other sculptures, you might have components. So if you're doing a whole full-size figure, you might have the main body up to the neck, and then you've got a mould for the arm, a mould for the other arm, a mould for the head, and then you might have 50 moulds of flowers to create a sort of posy of flowers that, a statue of Flora might hold.
Yeah.
And then those arm elements can be applied to the main body, prior to firing, after, within the sort of construction process.
It's interesting because
a bit like putting a teacup on a teacup handle on a teacup.
Yeah.
The handle comes out of one mould. I'm thinking of Wedgwood. Teacup comes out of the other, and then you sprig them on.
We actually have an interview on the channel with Giuseppe Parinello, who's a ceramic designer, but he specialises in mould making. And I actually feel like a lot of what he talked about the process of his work is kind of, what he does is on a much smaller scale, but it's sort of applicable to what you're talking about.
They're totally the same. And what is really interesting about the pottery industry and what they do, it hasn't changed in thousands of years. You can't. There's no other way of casting ceramics other than out of plaster.
Yeah.
But then a lot of the time we don't use molds. So this chap here was a clay study I did of a client's whippet, and in that instance I cast the whippet. I sculpted the whippet in clay. Took a rubber mould off it, sent the mould to the foundry where it was cast in bronze, and then I deconstructed that, pulled all the metal out, made sure it was hollow, and fired it. So rather than throw that away, I kept it. That's Coade Stone. I've just used it as a modelling clay.
Fine.
But the commission was in bronze. But rather than throw the original away, I've kept that one and given the bronze to the client.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of work in bronze. This is a portrait I did a couple of years ago. And I guess casting in bronze isn't dissimilar to forming Coade. I mean, bronze is formed out of moulds.
And I think that, that's actually something that's come up in a few of the interviews I've done with sculptors is, you sort of have the main material that you work in, but really if you can sculpt, you can, have it in any kind of material in the end.
Yeah.
And so for you, like Coade is the core of your practice, but as you say, it can be...
Coade is the core of our practice. Some years it tips into bronze. Some years we'd just be doing mainly bronze and not so much Coade. This year it looks like we're doing more Coade, slightly less bronze.
Yeah.
And then at Christmas we're doing a lot of plaster work. So, it's...
So we talked about the vases a little bit. And then you've got some urns as well that you're working on, but that's
the two very big vases. Yeah. So we've got two big vases from a historic house that they're of a set of 12. And the house is very much in the public eye, and it's over probably since the house is in London, so. They took on a lot of black sulfation, and I think the the treatment for the black was to overpaint them, and they've been overpainted for about 80 years.
So they've lost sort of all the detail.
Well, it's
basically.
all there, but it's under,
yeah,
I'm gonna say about 6-7 millimeters of paint. I mean,
that's basically like when you go into a house and the plaster cornice has been overpainted again and again. And
worse, because they were, they were doing it, and it was in a decorating. What do they call it? It was in their schedule of decoration work to the exterior of the house. So they were just, and they were painted sort of like Battleship Grey. We've restored 2 out of the 12. We've got another 2, and so that as a process means removing the vases, and they're big. They're about 5-6 feet tall. From the house, bring them down here where the paint's removed, and then we get back to the Coade surface and all its incredible detail.
And so, are you able to clean it?
Yeah, we can reduce the levels of black.
Okay.
Not over clean it, but we can reduce it so that to an agreeable level.
Fine. Will that over time, if you do that process quite a lot, will it reduce the thickness to a point that that's problematic, or?
No, the cleaning process doesn't involve moving any of the surface.
Okay, amazing.
There's no abrasion whatsoever in that process. And then we can start looking at maybe replacing some of the bits that are missing. Okay. So we can make those in Coade and piece them in.
That's great.
So that's...
Yeah, and then you've got I saw a corbel as well.
Oh yeah, corbel. Yeah, so that's sort of a large corbel which we're designing for another historic house that's having actually an additional building added to the grounds. And that's interesting. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into how that project's working, but it's we're seeing a lot of not in this workshop, but we are seeing the robot really coming into play in the stone industry, which is kind of extraordinary, really. So,
so shall we talk maybe about the positives, and then we can?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to navigate that conversation. I just say there are in this factory that we're working with, there are 6 or 7 robots that are producing decorative elements for a building all night, all day, all year.
So humans can't compete with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the robots and the people who run the workshops can't do the initial design. So we're being asked to design, say, in this instance, a corbel and the embellishment that goes in it. And then once they've got that design element, they can scan it, put it into a computer, and have a robot milling it all out of blocks of stone. So we're getting asked to design stuff for robots to execute.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I don't really know, to be honest. Because I can't... If I thought that it was boosting the stone industry and creating more stonework, more stone buildings, and that more operatives, people, craftsmen, young people will come into the industry as a result, I would say that's a positive thing. But I don't really know how... it's a bit like AI, we don't really know where it's going to go.
Because I guess that is the problem, right? Is that on one hand you could think, oh, well, the machines will bring down the price, and if the price is brought down, then that might mean more people will want it.
Yeah. It's not
people will want it, but then actually, is it really going to increase the demand, or is it actually just going to take work away? And especially actually when you're taking on apprentices, etc., you learn by repetition. So if you have a job like that where you could potentially have however many that you need to make, your apprentice is not going to be the designer on it, right? They're going to be the ones who take your work and then learn by doing it again and again. And so if the machine is the one doing it again and again, you're taking away those learning opportunities.
Yeah. It's difficult. I think, I suppose, I don't know, I may guess that it will take work away from us, but there aren't many 3D files.
So you feel like the design work isn't at risk?
Not at the moment. There's no 3D reference for a corbel with a with a canvas decoration in it. It just, it's
Yeah.
all up on buildings. It's not in the ether, not in the domain, in the internet.
But once they scan it, is it then in the domain?
I don't know, probably not. I'm sure they'll delete it or protect it. But then are there people who are going to go out to buildings and 3D reference embellishment and then make it available on the domain? Then you start to see the likes of me losing the opportunity to do design work.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
obviously AI has access to everything.
Yeah.
It hasn't got access to 3D files, but
Yeah.
I don't suppose that's so far away. All it means is someone to go and scan a corbel on a building in London, or scan 100 corbels on a building in London,
Yeah.
and another
that's the
100
thing
in
is I
Paris,
don't-
and then you've got the domain full of that's available to. But then whose intellectual property is it? It's.
Well, I think that's a real problem because I think workshops, I mean, I don't know how on top of things you are with intellectual property and protecting your work, etc. But I feel like the big corporations or architect firms might be protecting their work. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's is it something do you feel equipped to deal with that as a small business owner?
I think, to be honest, most of our commissions are protected anyway. The clients don't want to reproduce, don't want us to talk about where they're going, don't want.
It's interesting because.
I mean, an artist's work's always been protected, hasn't it? I mean, yeah, it's a.
I guess there's also,
subject.
arguments could be made for it. Maybe it's a positive that maybe machines can do the roughing out. When I interviewed Clooney Fretton, she mentions. She feels that could be a good thing because it then frees her up to be able to do.
But that's happened for centuries.
Yeah.
We've had pantographs, enlarging machines, and apprentices, and masons and carvers working for artists. I mean, Bernini would have had hundreds and hundreds of carvers working for him, executing his designs.
But we're not talking about that anymore. You're talking about machines that literally do everything.
They're doing 90% of the work rather than 50% of the work.
Yeah.
And they're doing it very quickly, and they're doing it very cheaply.
Yeah. And I guess, again, as you say, as long as people like you are doing the design part, at least it's good ornament that's out there. But then at the point at which, the design isn't even being done by someone who knows and understands and has been classically trained, then it's okay, well, we're also losing.
It's whether you could get someone who was classically trained, who then is also trained in CAD or all those 3D programs, who can then manipulate and create this work for the robots. To finish.
It's tricky. We don't have the answers, right?
We don't know. We don't know.
But I think it's important to talk about it because, we need to know what we're stepping into and whether it's a good thing or not. And people need to be able to realize what decisions they're making. Do they want to invest in craftspeople making work, or do they want to invest in machines doing the work?
Or is there a balance that can be found?
Exactly.
It's really new technology. I've hardly seen any of it. I haven't seen this factory that's going to produce all that work. I haven't seen the work yet.
Yeah. Another piece that you've got in your workshop is a lion.
2 lions, making 2 recumbent. Is that the word? Recumbent. Lying down, lying lions.
Oh yes, I know what you mean.
Recumbent.
Yeah.
Recumbent. 2 recumbent lions. That's quite an interesting process because it's no moulding, no casting. I've just done a sketch of one. I've sort of done a model about that big, and then I'm just modelling them up hollow, rather like you would model up a coil pot at school. It's just bigger, about 6 foot long.
Yeah.
And
so the plinth that you've got is actually full scale now, although you've done it with
it's
a
10% larger. Yeah.
And then you've got the small model of the.
Yeah, which I'll scale up from. And
are you going to do? Did you say it's 2? So
it's 2.
Is it symmetrical, or
no?
are you
They'll be different.
Okay.
And now they'll just be 2 lions for a client, and they'll be the only ones, and they won't be moulded, copied, or...
I feel like that's literally like the complete opposite of the work we've just talked about, where it's like really special, really unique.
Yeah, no, it won't photograph it, it's private, it'll go, I don't even know who the client is, it won't go on my Instagram, it won't go on my internet, anything, it'll be gone.
Yeah, so I guess today is the only opportunity to capture it. We won't get to see it finished.
No, exactly.
But maybe we can take it back to how you got here. Because, I mean, you know, you've obviously got a very impressive list of clients who, you know, we can't mention any of them, but I think we've hinted enough that people can imagine the sort of projects that you're working on. You know, you've brought the Coade method back to life over a period of 5 years of experimentation. You're, you know, leading a workshop of 6 full-time employees, am I right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's quite impressive.
Yeah. Well, how did I get there? It's, I suppose not academic at school. Very unusually, I would say, preoccupied with making things, as I still am now. So I think if I go back far enough, I probably started sort of my school holidays working in a furniture workshop at the age of 16. I kept doing that, and then I worked with picture framers. And
so that's whilst you were still in school?
That's what I'm still doing. Still doing GCSEs and A-levels.
It doesn't surprise me though, because even just this morning when you were showing me around your workshop, you're talking to me, but you're also like going over to something, sorting something out, going to something else. Like, you just seem to be constantly on the go. Yeah,
that's slightly because you've got to have eyes in the back of your head here, because if you've got 3 or 4 kilns all firing, all on different cycles, and you've got pieces of clay that are drying out that shouldn't dry out, and you know, you slightly have to.
But I feel like that's maybe a rhythm that you picked up when you were already sort of doing all of these jobs.
Yeah, it's a form of distraction, and I do get very distracted. It's hard to know whether the distraction is inherent in me or whether it's put upon me by.
Well, maybe you've designed a life that allows for it to be part of it.
So
you got sort of a good overview of different. But it sounds like it was always within crafts and making it sort of traditional.
Yeah, I was always representational. You know, it was. Very interested in copying things, and I hope latterly I've tried to move away from that a little bit and try and produce my own work, so that with that whippet portrait there's something more gestural, it's slightly expressive, and you know, this portrait here, you know, probably did it in a couple of days rather than 2 weeks of meticulously trying to do a portrait.
Couple of days.
So you know, it's sort of so school, and then. So I ended up at the City and Guilds of London Art School, which was absolutely brilliant, and I was doing the restoration conservation course there, and then halfway through I flipped to the stone carving sort of sculpture course, and I came out with sort of those 2 things going on, which is basically what I sort of do now. Yeah,
and you said that the training whilst there, that was quite intense.
It was very intense. I didn't realise it was at the time, but you know, because so many of my contemporaries at university were perhaps doing lectures and essays, and it was, you know, the hours in the week of study were less. But we were at college from 9 till 6 or 7 in the evening, and then in the holidays I was sent to a masonry yard up in Cambridgeshire, who were doing a lot of work for the Westminster Abbey and Ely Cathedral. So I was working with stonemasons, 20 of them, really learning a huge amount from old hands.
And learning, combining the sort of like in the studio academic sort of approach with the actual industry experience.
Yeah, so exactly, which was invaluable. And, I had 3 years of that, working pretty much all the time, summer holidays, Easter, Christmas holidays, and then at the college during the term time.
Going abroad as well, right?
Yeah. I think we were going to Turkey, and we did some bits in Egypt, and and then Westminster Abbey and Ely, and it was pretty amazing, incredible college. And then I came out of there and did a little bit of work with a contemporary artist, quite a well-known British artist, doing very contemporary carved stone for him, for working on his designs. which was great.
But very different to the world of conservation,
yeah,
right?
very modern, very contemporary, very minimal. I was actually working for Anish Kapoor, and he, leading up to a retrospective he had in the Hayward Gallery in the 90s. That was a great experience. Big scale, big heavy pieces of stone.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's quite like commercially focused, galleries, etc. It's very different. You've really got to see a multifaceted.
Yeah, the Lisson Gallery, that's his gallery, and the Hayward Gallery, and that environment in London.
Yeah.
And then after that, went back to more of a historic scenario where I was working with historic houses, and then I discovered the Coade thing, and pushed that.
How did you come across it? Was it just through visiting different? Because you visit a lot of historic houses, right?
Yeah, so I was working for a company called Clifton Conservation in the 90s, and they had a Coade caryatid, Egyptian caryatid, in their workshop, and I'm sure it had a missing nose. Nobody really had that sort of depth of understanding as to how it was made, and it was at that point that started looking at how we might be able to make a new nose. I think it was something like that, or a new finger, or how you might just be able to make it. How was it made? Why is it such a mystery?
And so then you kind of followed that up, and how do you go from, you've sort of found Coade Stone and it's sort of piqued your interest, you've done all of your experimentation, but then like setting up a business, and the people that you now work with, you worked with for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I mean the business is the people that work in it. I mean the people I work with we're in constant dialogue all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm doing something very personal like a portrait of someone, I'll still be inviting people to come in and look and critique. It's evolved with discussion and all the people I work with. But it's really evolved from small to large, with help from other people all the way. It's evolving clients has helped, getting more challenging work, design work, larger work.
Yeah.
And then more recently working more in bronze, just to try and make sure that we're in a position where we can offer anything to clients. And
So where do you see the business sort of going? Do you want to grow it? Are you happy where
I think carry on as we are. I'd like to try and do more figurative sculpture, perhaps try and do more public sculpture, public work, perhaps work more, try and keep the bronze work going.
Because you mentioned portraiture is something that you want to do more
I've done a lot of portraiture in the last 5 or 6 years, portrait sculpture.
Yeah.
And that's extremely challenging, and
in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way, in a frustrating way. It's ultimately very unforgiving. But it's great.
Yeah. You're capturing someone's spirit as well as their likeness.
Yeah, and most human beings are the best critiques of a portrait. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But just try and bring in more challenging work and figurative work, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be, I guess the dream commission would be more portraiture. Or do you have something? Yeah,
maybe something figurative. Actually I'd quite like to, I do like working on animals. I'd love to do an equestrian piece, a life-size stallion in bronze.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
You probably would have to sort of find the house that is going to go in first.
Find the client who wants it first.
Yeah, exactly. Something of the right scale. I think it was quite interesting to touch on, the sort of process of Coade, but then also talking about, as you say, the technology in the industry. Yeah, you mean the robots that are coming? Yeah, it'd be interesting to watch that spot. Because I think what you described about the Coade Stone and how it had sort of fallen out of practice, and how it wasn't just a question of recipe. It was also a question of like people having the knowledge of working the kiln,
the entire craft,
the
entire process.
It's like every element of it. I think we forget it's not just individuals knowing the technique, but it's also all of the support mechanisms around them, and there's a sort of holistic approach to making. And if you lose one element, everything else is sort of a domino effect, and it's really hard to reverse that.
Yeah.
And I think with, in the same way that code fell out of being produced, you could see that if machines were to replace, a lot of the pipeline or a lot of the demand and take up that demand, then that's less opportunity for, young makers to get the practice they need to get to the level that you're at.
Yeah. That is something to worry about. I suppose the question is, will computers be able to do design? I think I'm consciously trying to move away from that world. I'm trying to make sure that we are designers and that people look to us for design. Mm-hmm. I don't know, will we want a computer to do a portrait of someone? Yeah. Would a client want that? I don't.
Yeah, it's not really.
It's like asking a computer to write a book, a novel. I mean, it doesn't really. And let's hope not. Mm. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I think we're getting into the realm of, what is the value of artwork, and I think, for me at least, part of the value is who makes it.
Yeah.
But I guess some people might disagree with us.
Yeah, I mean, you ask an artisan or an artist to produce something, and you want their expression in it, don't you? You want their design, their input, that human element.
Yeah.
I don't really know what a computer can do. Mm-hmm. That's the world of AI, I suppose. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you get many more commissions.
Thank you.
With not just design, but the production as well.
Yeah.
I hope that through this interview and the sort of visit to your workshop, people can sort of get a glimpse of, what it is, what it takes, and it's quite a magical world, really. I know it's your everyday, but...
No, I realise it is. It's very special, yeah. It's great, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've linked Coade's website below, and please don't hesitate to leave any questions below. I'll do my best to answer them, and if I can't, I'll get Stephen's input. Thank you for watching. It means a lot, especially as at the moment this channel is entirely self-funded. So please spread the word. Like, share and subscribe. See you next week.
I know at the moment there's a lot of two-dimensional reference in the in the internet, in memory, in the ether, what do you call it, in existence,
sort of public consciousness, I guess?